Good evening, everyone. This is Blacklight on Sports. I'm Dr. Mitchell-Palmer-McDonald,
I'm Charles Hallman.
and today we have a very, very special guest, um, Frank Sentwali, and he's a author, um, master of spoken word, right?
Mastering.
Mastering,
Mastering, yeah. I
mastering.
call myself a master.
You're
Yeah,
not a master yet,
I,
huh?
I, I remember
You're not a master, all right?
no. Stokely one time I was on a panel with Stokely from Mint
Yeah,
Conditioning,
yeah, yeah.
and he introduced himself and said, my name is Stokely and I'm an aspiring artist. And I said, well, if he's an aspiring artist, then I ain't even nowhere near in spoken
Yeah.
word.
Well, let's start out by telling us a little bit about your background. How you grew up. I know you were also good in athletics, and you're an outstanding basketball player in high school. And talk about your journey.
Oh man, well, it's funny. A lot of people don't know that I was adopted, right? So my journey actually starts really weird.
Mm-hmm.
I was adopted at 2 months old. I was adopted by Leroy Gardner Jr.,
Yes.
legendary St. Paul and University of Minnesota basketball player, activist, educator, professor,
Yeah.
the whole nine. And Rennie Ransom is my mom, and she was basically in the St. Paul community, a legendary educator,
Yes.
counselor at St. Paul Central. I remember one day I was walking home from school, and some of the brothers that was on the other side of things, was messing with me, and a brother on the block said, "Man, that's Miss Ransom's son. He's off limits. He's untouchable. I wouldn't have got my degree if it wasn't for Miss Ransom." so,
That's
so
good.
yeah,
That's cool.
so I was adopted at 2 months old. They got divorced when I was 4, and then both of my parents remarried. My mother remarried at when I was 5, and my
Mm-hmm.
dad remarried when I was 7. And I say that to say, in an era where so many kids are in single parent households. I was amazingly blessed to, for one, have a mother who was 15 years old when she gave birth to me, who had the foresight that she wouldn't be able to give me the life that she wanted me to have and
Mm-hmm.
put me up for adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And then to end up, for a lot of people going through divorces it's a really difficult time. And it was difficult for me. But looking back, I had two mothers,
Mm-hmm.
two dads, from just this broad spectrum of what it is to be black in America. My mother and my father, who adopted me, were educators. And intellectualism was really important. My stepdad graduated from mechanic arts. He was blue collar. He worked at the Ford plant. He putting in 60-hour work weeks, taught you how to work really hard. He fixed everything in the house himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so he, made me, because I'm the kid, help him. He's fixing the plumbing. I got to help. He's working on the car. I got to help. He's putting in a fireplace. I got to help. He's doing a new bathroom. I got to help. Right. And then my stepmother was in charge of special events at the University of Minnesota. And so she was in charge of putting on, homecoming. She was in charge of doing homecoming. She was in charge of the MLK celebrations. She was actually one of the pioneers behind the MLK Day celebrations that they do at Northrop. And so I was exposed to people like Jeffrey Holder and Noel Pointer and Maya Angelou. I had this amazing upbringing, lived in St. Paul, Rondo community.
Yeah.
And I was a Webster, which is now Barack Obama, uh, Ramsey, which is now, what is it, Hidden Rivers or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yep.
And then after a quick detour out to live with my dad for 2.5 years in Golden Valley, and going to Plymouth Middle School in Robbinsdale Armstrong, I moved back home to graduate from St. Paul Central, where I was basically raised in,
Mm-hmm.
that building. And that's what I needed, was to go home and finish my youth at home. So, and then I played ball at Armstrong and Central. Had the distinction to be in all conference in both the Lake Red, the old Lake Red, when it was the real Lake Red. When it was serious.
Oh yeah.
Hopkins, ICO, Minnetonka, Armstrong. Yeah, they were all in the same conference. So I made all
Yeah.
conference there, and then all conference in the St. Paul City Conference. And
Mm-hmm.
if it wasn't for Cretan coming and stealing all our brothers with money and stuff, then we would have went to state. Not that I'm bitter, but they gave Mr. Kelly a job so they could get his son over there, and stole all the brothers we grew up with, and
Mm-hmm.
beat us.
Where did you Well, where did you go from there? Once you graduated, and then how did you get into spoken word?
I was always into hip hop. I was actually the first rapper to perform rap music at the main stage at Rondo Days, at St. Paul's famous Rondo
Okay,
Days.
okay.
So yeah, in 1988 was the first time they had hip hop performers on the main stage, and it was my crew, the H2O posse, and I was the opening of the performance. There was three of us that were MCs and a DJ. And so I did solo, and Cassius and Trey Beck had a duo, and then we finished with all of us on stage. So when I went to Rondo Days this year and saw Rakim and MC Light on that stage, it was like, man, they on the stage that I pioneered. And those are the pioneers. So I was like, nobody knows that, but for me, it was personal. And so I was always into hip hop, and always an MC, always a writer. I started writing when I was in the second grade. Really, I went to a McIntyre School for Gifted and Talented,
Hmm.
and until I was in the third grade, and they did a book fair, and we all wrote our own books. And that's the first time I realized I had a gift, because apparently, unbeknownst to me at that time, I wrote a book that was well beyond what 7 year olds are supposed to write. And then the movie Beach Street came out in 1984.
Yeah, I remember that
And
movie.
yeah, when Melly Mel said, there's gold in the street and there's diamonds under feet, yet the children in Africa don't even eat. There's flies on their faces, they're living like mice, and the houses even make the ghetto look nice. The water tastes funny, it's forever too sunny, and they work all month and don't make no money. I was 11 when I heard that. And I said, I want to do that. And
Mm,
it wasn't just that he was flowing, but it was what he was saying.
mm.
Because if you remember back then, if you stayed up late enough, you'd get those infomercials with the Ethiopian famine. And,
Oh yeah.
and so he was painting a picture of what I remember seeing being up past my bedtime on TV. And I said, I want to write stuff that moves people the way that moved me, because what he's talking about is change. What he's talking about is painting a picture that makes people want to act on what's wrong
Mm.
in society. And at 11 years old, that registered with me. And so I went to Southwest State to play basketball, and I was already always writing. So I went to Southwest State University, played basketball, and obviously I wasn't performing, because where are you going to perform in Marshall, Minnesota, and doing the type of hip hop that I wanted to do, you
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
So when I came home from school, it was I was there 3 years, and I came home, and it was kind of like, okay, now what? I was a black man in the now what? I felt like I did everything they say you're supposed to do.
Right.
So now what? And then Martez Williams, may he rest in peace, a legendary athlete from Patrick Henry. That was my eight down in Marshall. He played football and basketball down there.
Yes, he did.
And so he and we really bonded, because Gail Smaller went to Henry before he transferred to Central and played with me in high school. And so I had a connection with them Henry boys from Gail. And then when Martez and I both were freshmen at Southwest State together, we really bonded. And so he came back to the Twin Cities shortly after I did. And when he was murdered, that really sent me into a spiral of depression.
Mm.
And my high school sweetheart saw me walking down the street one day, just looking like you look when you're depressed. And she had just gotten her degree and from the University of Minnesota in journalism. And she was an entertainment editor or entertainment writer for the Star Trib.
Okay.
And she was doing a story on this place called the Bomb Shelter, which was the old KMOJ building that was condemned and torn down when it was over off of 55. Right. So before that building was torn down, the city had given Gail Smaller and a crew permission to use, I think, maybe not been that specific building, but another one that was on that strip that was they were tearing down as well, and gave them permission to do performances in that building until it was torn down. And so she took me there, and I found a second life. Truth Mays was there, Sister Amina was there, Gail was there, Tyle and Black, who would eventually be my partners in Edu-Poetic Enterbrainment. I
Mm.
met all of them there, and and I had a piece that I had written in tribute to Martez, and really it was a statement about the violence that was taking our young brothers out here. A piece called "The Killing Season," and I performed that piece, and they gave me a standing ovation. And right then and there, I said, "This is what I'm supposed to do with my life." So that led the pathway to what I do to this day, and I took it to the youth because it changed my life. 3 years after that day, I looked up and I was at the Walker Arts Center on stage. I looked up and I was at First Avenue in the main room on stage, and my life had just started to really take a turn for a direction. And I said, man, if this craft can do this for me where I was at in that darkness, you know who needs a way out of darkness? Our young people that are in school that maybe are looking for their light. So I created programming out of scratch to go into the schools, and that was around 1998,
Okay.
and I've been in the schools ever since.
Man.
Now, the spoken word get a bad rap, and I hate to use that as a pun, but because most people think rap is what we hear today.
Mhm.
But I grew up in the era with the last poets and Gil Scott Heron.
Mhm.
But the spoken word get too much confused or converted, confused into
Convoluted, yeah.
convoluted into rap.
Um, I think it depends on where someone is exposed to it from, right? When people ask me that don't really know, I say, well, I said spoken word and rap are cousins, right?
Mm-hmm.
And rap is that cousin that when they come by the house, you're gonna be excited for them to come over. You know you're about to act a fool. Y'all about to have a ball. You
Mm-hmm.
might put your valuables somewhere hidden,
Mm-hmm.
because you know that cousin. We all got that cousin. Love to see him, but we got to hide some stuff when they come over. And you know you're going to kick it, and you and that cousin are going to have a blast. Excuse me. And then you're going to be happy to see that cousin leave. Like it's only, about 12 hours is all you can do. One overnight with that cousin, and then you ready for their mama to come get them. Right? That's rap, which is not to be confused with hip hop because it's all under the hip hop umbrella. Spoken word is that cousin. You don't have to put anything away. They might stay for the whole weekend. They might even go to school with you on Monday morning. You know, you're gonna have a different type of fun. You're gonna have fun with that cousin. You're gonna do things productive, but it's a different type of fun, and it's just a different energy. And so that's how I like to describe them. We all got both cousins, and so that's how I like to describe it. I wish more young people actually knew the timeline from the Harlem Renaissance to the beatnik era to the Black Arts movement to the early hip hop era to what we have today, because then they would understand not just the role that poetry plays in that entire timeline, but Black artistic expression across the board. If they knew that every time they say ho, right, they're really borrowing from Cab Calloway's Minnie the Moocher. I wish they knew that um, every time they make another song that deals with police brutality or the relationship between police and community, that they're borrowing from Langston Hughes, Who But the Lord, or they're borrowing from County Color, right? But um, if they understood that, and educators understand it, which is why I get to go in schools. My first thought was I'm going to go in schools and do hip hop education. They wouldn't touch it. So I had to sneak in the back door, use spoken word, and then educate about hip hop through spoken word.
Yeah, that's good.
That's real good. How important do you think it is for young people to, I'm not going to say, do what you're doing, but just the importance of being exposed to spoken word and the history that you just mentioned? How important do you think that is? I mean, is that part of the reason why you go into the schools to educate the young people?
Yeah, but I think it's more important just to give them a platform to use their voice.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of many vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go into the school, if one kid is like, well, can I perform my piece like a rap? Sure. You know, it's really more about empowering them to have platform to use their voice.
Okay.
Um, and those that are really interested in it,
Mm-hmm.
then it's important for them to get the history because they're going to want to keep doing it. But I think my overall goal when I go into the schools is not so much to give them an education on spoken word, but first and foremost, just give them a voice, give them a platform for voice,
Mm-hmm.
and then give them basic English skills terminology like what is a simile, what is a quatrain, what is a hyperbole, what is a metaphor, alliteration. And then what's fun is, you know, sometimes I'll let students bring in their favorite rap song or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can dissect it. And they realize that, oh, this artist that might even be speaking about something that normally we wouldn't give credence to in the schools actually is way more intelligent in craft than you understand. You didn't know this young man because you didn't know craft until now. Now that you know craft,
Mm-hmm.
now you see that Lil Yachty is actually probably a little bit smarter than you realized. You know, and then it doesn't become about the streets, it becomes about craftsmanship. And I think anytime we can speak craftsmanship to our young people, whether it's basketball, whether it's art, I think that's important. Or the craft of just being a positive member of society, right? There's craftsmanship to that. There's a tact and an etiquette to that that I think we have to start instilling in our youth craftsmanship.
Do you have any how can I say it? Highlights or specific moments that you remember where kind of like the light bulb went on, as you're
Mhm.
doing your thing, and then one of the students gets up and wants to perform his or her piece. Uh, do you have any moments like that that you remember that stand out?
Absolutely. So in my residency, the students, there's a rubric. I make it very academic, so they have to perform for their grade. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a rubric going in. So all the students, if they want full credit, are
Mm-hmm.
going to perform their piece. The highlights, and it's not even one in particular, it's a bunch of them,
Right.
are when you get those kids that have been quiet all week long,
Right.
haven't said a word
Yes.
all week, the meekest, quietest kid, and then they volunteer on presentation day to go first, and a voice comes out of them that maybe nobody's heard. I had a teacher break down in tears one time when a student performed. I didn't know why she was crying. And that teacher said, "Do you know that that kid's a selective mute and hasn't said a word all year long to the class?"
Mm.
And she said, "I can't wait to email this kid's parents and let their parents know what their child did."
Mm.
You know, not saying a word in terms of like speak up in front of the class, but doesn't talk to classmates, nobody. And I didn't even realize the kid was a selective mute because, you know, you're teaching there's so many kids and they were participating, but I never noticed that they weren't actually speaking because we do writing first. So I never noticed they weren't actually speaking. And so when they volunteered to go first, I didn't think nothing of it, you know, because I'm just connecting with youth and not really predetermining what they're capable of.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just putting food on the table, and if they're hungry, they can eat, you know, and
Mm.
that's how I look at it. So those are like my prized moments. Or, you know, as you know, as an educator, when you get a text message, not text that message, a Facebook message out of nowhere from that starts, "Mr. Sentwali, you might not remember me. I was in your
Oh
class
yeah.
years
Oh
ago,
yeah. We
but
want.
I just
Yeah.
want you to know that your class changed my life and inspired me." I got one of those last spring. Young lady, I don't even remember who she is, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
And she said she now is in Texas and she does spoken word performances. She does a podcast. And she said, "I never thought that I would be speaking in public platform for a living, but your class, um, your class changed my life." And so, yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier you had to go in the back door
Hmm.
to get going. What was describe that pushback that you had to deal with to get to do the things you want to do in the school? Because we know the schools can be traditional.
Hmm.
I heard today this guy was talking about how if we if we as black people get through school, we become white nationalists, or we
Mm-hmm.
become because we learn all the things that they want us to learn. If we go through that, so how did you handle that? How did you got over the obstacles and was able to get into schools and then stay there after you got there?
Yeah, well, I was very lucky because, as we expressed earlier, my mother was an educator at St. Paul, and so I had an in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because not just through my mother, but all of the educators that she, when I was growing up, introduced me to or raised me around.
Mm-hmm.
And so I created a brochure, and the brochure had I was working with Ahanti Young, who's a percussionist, drummer, actor with Penumbra Theater before he moved, and he was doing African drumming, and I had a workshop that was it was called From the Griot to the MC, a timeline in history of spoken word, rap, and hip hop, right? And so that was just a auditorium style workshop that I would do. And then I had my residency program where I went in and I actually taught the craft of how to create spoken word pieces. Um, and I noticed that they weren't really as much interested in the hip hop aspect of it, even though I tried to word it, in this really
Mm-hmm.
academic way. But they were interested in the spoken word aspect of it. And my mom was actually like, well, that they see rap in the in the workshop, the performance workshop. And so she said, let's focus on this residency, which was fine with me because the residency was more days meant more money
Mm-hmm.
and more access. And so that was kind of that guy. I had my mom as a guide. And then because of her connections at Central, Jan Mandel, who was running the Black Box Theater at Central, hooked me up with the ninth grade teacher, at the time, English teacher. And so I was able to get in through that. And then Jan brought me in to do some stuff at the Black Box. And then I had somebody that could write up a critique, right? So I had quotes from Jan, I had quotes from the teacher I work with that talked about my program, and then because I had educator cred, then I was able to send that around. But I just had to kind of leave the rap part out and focus on the spoken word. But what would happen is I'd get in the classrooms, and the kids would all say, "Can you rap?" Because the kids wanted to hear the rap. So I said, "Of course I can rap." And so then I would rap for the kids, and then those kids that maybe would not have been engaged in spoken word,
Mm-hmm.
now they're engaged. Well, once the classroom teacher sees the kids are engaged, what's she gonna do,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's how I was able to kind of circumvent it. But I had the blessing of network.
Um, did you? We know you didn't. You kind of got in through the back way, but once you got in and once you started to expand,
Mm-hmm.
was there any resistance, or was your reputation
No,
kind of sound by then?
yeah, my reputation was sound by then. Somebody recommended that I join the Compass roster, which is I'm technically on staff as what's called the principal teaching artist with Compass. And they
Or?
actually created the position for me. So that was a big shout out to Dawn because she said we want to keep you and we like to pay you salary as opposed to being a contractor.
Wow.
And basically, she was like, "So, what's it going to cost to buy you out of your independence?" Right?
Basically, yep.
Yeah,
That's what.
you know.
Yeah, that's what happens. You
Yes,
know.
but them benefits was the selling
Uh-huh.
point,
Of course.
health and
Yeah.
vacation and
Yes.
sick leave and things like that.
Yeah.
So, and a guaranteed check every 2 weeks as opposed to, when your contract, we got paid 30 days after our paperwork was turned in. So, but Compass, I once I got on the Compass roster, and now I have an organization shopping me. Plus, I have the cred that I got from the credentials from teachers that had worked with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 2011, I became the Compass Teaching Artist of the Year. And so for the state of Minnesota. And so, by now I'm awarded. And when, once you start getting awards, then it's smooth sailing from there. And I was the only spoken word artist on the roster at the time. Now there's four of us because the work that I did created a demand
Mhm.
that they had to hire other artists on roster to meet. So I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how does that make you feel when there's a kind of a catch-22 because at one point, hey man, I'm the only one, right?
Right.
You know, but then there's the other side to that where that, there was, just like you said, there was one
Mm-hmm.
and now there's four. Um, how does that make you feel that, you were once the only one and then now, probably without even realizing it,
Mm-hmm.
you open the doors for others to come, and then I'm pretty sure in turn, as they gain experience, they will open more doors,
Yes.
and then things expand,
Yes.
and then your message goes even further.
I love it. I mean, because it never stopped my work from coming in. You know, it really just what happened was the demand was such that one person couldn't meet it all. There's only so many weeks in the school year, and I can only be in so many places, right?
Mm.
And so I think that was beautiful for the craft. That there were so many educators that felt like this craft is valuable for young people's educational experience. That if they can't get Frank, well, who else you got, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And also, some of my former students, Tish Jones, who
Oh yeah.
is the director of True Art Speaks,
Yes.
Tish was one of my first students. And now she has a tree of young people that she has,
Yes.
worked with that are out doing the work and helping other young people find their voice. And so I think that you can never have enough people helping young people find their voice. And and I'll say this humbly, when you're good at what you do, it doesn't really matter how many other people are doing it
Mhm.
because nobody else can be you.
Right.
So I think, the advice I would give to anybody listening is, be good at what you do, be passionate about what you do, and don't worry about how many other people might be doing, especially if you're doing something that is making a difference in young people's lives. Tish has a voice I don't have. Maybe there's a kid that she can reach that I can't. A Guante or Desdemona or, whoever's out doing the work, everybody has their own voice. They can reach kids I can't reach. I can reach kids they can't reach. But the goal is for all of us to try to reach as many young people as we can and help them find their voice.
You based uh, in Richfield, or what schools are you working on?
I work all over the state through Compass. I do a residency every year for 1 week in Roseau, Minnesota,
Mm.
which is, for those of you who don't know, it's 10 miles from the Minnesota-Canada border in the middle of nowhere. And when I'm there in May, literally, I could show up on Monday. On Tuesday, it's 80 degrees, and I'm over by the state park chilling outside after teaching class in shorts and a t-shirt. And 2 days later, it's a snowstorm. And I've had that experience up there many years. I've worked down in Rochester with Rochester STEM Academy, which is an all Somali charter school, all Muslim Somali charter school. I work in Edina. I work in Northeast Middle School. I work at Highland Park. I work at Ann Watton. I'm all over the state with my programs, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Yeah, but I coach basketball at Richfield High, and so that's my other love.
Yeah, I want you to talk about that a little bit, and I also wanted to ask this, as you talk about that. Um, did your involvement in athletics, even your involvement today, but even as a player, um, help you as you went on your journey with the spoken word?
Absolutely, more the performing of spoken word than the writing.
Okay.
Because the writing was gonna be my peaceful place for me, no matter what I was doing. But when you are a athlete and you want to be good and you want to be on the biggest stages, you are a performer. You guys coach, and we've seen many a player that has light loss.
Mm.
They killing in practice, but boy, when them lights come on at 7 o'clock, they get lost. So
True,
we
true,
call it
true.
light loss over there at Richfield. And and so when you've gone out there and performed on the basketball court, and like I said, being at Central, and Mitch, this growing up in St. Paul,
Mhm.
we didn't grow up with the AAU programs the way they are now.
Oh, and most definitely we didn't.
Our dream, not goal, our dream was to be one of those 12 with them warm-ups and the band playing George Benson Superstar. And you come out of that hallway and you would do that circle around the court.
Yeah.
We didn't have AAU. We blood, sweat, and cried on the basketball courts in 90-degree heat by ourselves in the summer because we knew out of the entire city of St. Paul, if you was one of them 12, you was one of the baddest.
Yeah.
And you definitely couldn't have Light Loss playing for Central in the 80s and early 90s.
Yeah, true.
And so when it came to getting on stages, the nervousness, I always tell my students, nerves is a part of the uniform of public performance. I say, don't you ever get scared? Every time I get ready to go step on the stage, I get scared.
Yes.
Because that's my body reminding me that I care,
Yeah.
that it matters. But when you're a hooper and you go out there in front of those fans and you perform, it's no different. So when I hit that stage, I'll tell you the first time when I did that performance at Rondo Days, and this is back in the days when with Rondo Days, the audience in front of the main stage was as far as your eyes could carry you.
Mm-hmm.
There was just seas of people.
That's
and
true.
I was 15 years old. And I was shaking before they announced our name. I mean, I was literally shaking. And I'll never forget, I stood on the steps of that stage right before it was my cue to go on stage. And I said to myself, you're going to look real foolish if you turn back now. It's go time. And I remember the first song, for about half of the first song, I had my head down because I was scared to look up at the people. And I looked over to my left, and on the steps of the stage, Vesta Kelly Jr., AK, was sitting there bobbing his head. And I could see him because he was sitting below me on the stage, and he was bobbing his head. And when I saw the homie bobbing his head, I said to myself, I must be doing something. And I looked out, and the crowd was rocking with us. And then after that, it was over. I was bit by the stage bug. It was over. But so yeah, I don't know that if I wasn't a basketball player, if I would have had the association to find the courage to go out there, because there had to be like 5,000 people out there that day. When you're talking about your first big public performance, usually it's in front of like 100 homies. My first big public performance was in front of 5,000 people. And if it wasn't for basketball, I don't know how I would have reacted to that.
Okay. Talk about your coaching aspects. How'd you get in coaching? Who influenced you? Who inspired you to do that part of it? Because as we talked earlier, coaching is challenging, and it definitely has changed a lot over the years.
Yeah, my dad, when you're our age and you're young, there wasn't basketball on every day like there is now. It was Sunday, and if you was lucky, it was a doubleheader, and you could be guaranteed that either the Lakers or the Celtics was going to be a part of it.
True.
And I would sit on my dad's lap or sit on the couch next to him as a real young dude, and I would be breaking the game down. And actually my father, and it turned out to be right. He said, boy, you're going to struggle as a basketball player because you think too much. He said, you see the game in a way that most people don't see the game, but that's probably not going to help you on the court. You're going to overthink. And he was right. That was probably my biggest weakness on the court is I wish I could have cared less and just balled. But, and he would always tell me, he said, you're going to be a really good coach one day. And when I came back from Southwest State, my younger brother, who's 7 years younger than me, was playing on a little house league team, and all of a sudden they didn't have a coach. I don't remember what happened. I think I was 22 at the time, something like that. And my dad said, "Why don't you coach?" And they were sixth graders. He said, "Why don't you coach a team?" All right. And I had them boys balling. I had them boys playing mind games with them little sixth graders. I had my little brother running around. He was a football player. He wasn't that good at basketball. He was built like a football player. So I just had him running around intimidating kids. And but I had him going, and the kids really gravitated toward me. And then when I had my own son, I ended up coaching over at Jimmy Lee, and I was coaching with Kylan, and I was coaching the 10U team. My son was 8, and he had one son 9 and one son 10. And we coached a 10U team, and they did okay that first year, but that next year we won one state championship with them. And I think we won 2 state championships with that group before they finished their 12U times. And then it just started happening. And then I coached at the Blake Academy, their middle school program, and I'm still pretty young in it. And they gave me their A team, their 8th grade A team, and they were just playing conference ball. And so after my first year, the high school head coach at Blake said, if we can convince some of the kids that don't play for the school team, they just play traveling. If we can convince some of those kids to play school ball, because I want them to get the coaching you're giving, how would you feel about mixing a school season with a traveling season? And I said, sure, let's do it. So he had to do that to sell these kids on not playing traveling for Edina or Eden Prairie, wherever they play traveling. And so we played a school schedule and a traveling schedule. And we ended up, we went undefeated all the way through the school conference season, and lost the championship game to a team we had beaten twice on like a 35-foot buzzer beater. But then that next weekend, we won the MSF state championship. That's when they had the old MSF. And then won the NYS state championship 2 weeks later. And that's when I knew I could coach, because I had Blake kids, right? And if you know anything about the Blake Academy, they're not known for basketball. And we didn't even have traveling jerseys. We showed up looking like the Bad News Bears. Short shorts, polyester jerseys, Blake on. There was nothing special about how we looked. But I had these kids picking up 84 feet. It would blow these other traveling kids' mind. These little tiny Blake kids was picking up. We played baseline to baseline. I coached them like they were city kids. And you know, I'm very proud when we won the MYAS, that group. I told them, I mean, they brought tears to my eyes because we overachieved like nobody's business. And I said, you guys now know how to win. I said, no matter what Nick does with you guys when you get to the varsity level, winning habits are constant. It doesn't matter what style you play. It doesn't matter what system you're in. You know what wins. And that group is the only group, as far as I know, still in the history of Blake Senior High to win their section and make it to a state tournament.
Man,
and that's when I knew I could coach. And I'm a development coach. I don't know I'd be good as a varsity coach in today's era, because the stuff I love to do, there's so little of it at the varsity head coaching level. You're now a manager, you know, people manager, program manager, and all that. I just love to help kids get better. I'm a skills coach, and I love. Look, case in point, them Blake kids, them 8th grade kids, we have film session regularly. Who you know got film session for 8th grade traveling team? I mean, we were, and I'm talking about I had Blake kids, so they had the attention span. We had 90-minute, 2-hour film sessions. Them kids got good. They learned how to play. But who's crazy enough to do 90-minute, 2-hour film sessions with 8th graders unless you're maniacal about, you know, the improvement of the kids.
Now, how many years have you been at Richfield?
This will be year 6.
Okay.
Yeah. I came at the right time. Well, I thought it was going to be, we went back-to-back state tournaments my first 2 years. I was like, oh, yeah, it's going to be real good. And I had just left De La Salle's girls program with Tanisha. So I'm like, I'm supposed to be in the section finals every year, no matter where I'm at. And we ain't been back since. Then reality kicked in. I thought I had a horseshoe in my pocket, a Lucky Charm or something. No, it's just timing.
Man. Now, usually around this time they to end the show, we usually ask our guests to talk about something, maybe a question that we didn't ask, or give advice, or what do you call them, Charles? You usually call them
pearls of wisdom.
Pearls of wisdom. That's right. Yeah. See, I'm not ashamed to borrow from my brother on camera, but we usually add. Now, you don't have to have anything, But if you do, what would you tell the people that will be looking at this?
Man, I don't know if I have any pros of wisdom, but I have a plea.
Mm-hmm.
Can we please reinvest in standards of accountability and decorum and etiquette for our children?
Mm.
That is a plea from my heart.
Mm.
Can we please spend more positive experience time with our children? You know, our parents sent us outside to play to get us out the house because we was bugging them.
True.
Now kids don't bug their parents because they got a TV, a computer, a video game, and a cell phone in their room. And the parents aren't bugging their kids because the kids got a TV, a cell phone, a computer, and a video game in their room.
Mm-hmm.
But the impact on that is um, our parents, parents today aren't around to watch how their kids socialize, to hold them accountable for how they speak with each other, let alone adults, to hold them accountable for their decorum. And we live in a time now, especially if you look at our political sphere, where quote unquote elected leaders don't have any decorum. They don't have any tact.
True.
If we don't instill decorum, tact, etiquette, manners in our children, then it's going to be Lord of the Flies around here for real.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be my plea is, can we please refocus those values to our children? Because I work with them, whether in the classroom, on the basketball court, in the community center, and we could do a lot more as educators and coaches if the youth would come as a better client with etiquette.
Very good, very good. Frank, I've seen you grow
Yes,
from
sir.
a young man to I said younger man. You ain't getting
No, I was young. Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm over 50 and I'm a pawpaw now. So at what point do I get grandpa cred?
Well,
It'll come soon enough.
He did. I got a 4-month-old, so
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
little John, yeah.
You already did.
but
Yeah.
I'm proud of you. I know your father was proud of you. I got a chance to spend a lot of time with him. A legend. And we didn't even ask you about him and speak about him, but he still didn't get the respect and the honor he should have gotten for the things he did.
Yeah.
Not even speak about your mother and what she did. I mean, there's things, and that's why this show is so important, because there's people who have done things in our community that don't get the limelight, don't get the talk about, except when they're not here.
Yeah.
And my pastor always say, you give people their flowers when they can smell them, not when they can't smell them, they don't mean nothing. So thank you, Frank, for coming on our show.
Yeah, thank you very
we
much.
appreciate that.
Thank y'all for having me. And, for the listeners, if you enjoy this conversation, I am the product of good parenting. And so this is what good parenting produces.
All right. This is Blacklight on Sports. I'm Dr. Mitchell Palmer-McDonald.
I'm Charles Hallman, and thank you for listening and viewing. And please read us in the newspaper every week, and please join us next time.